Decades of rage, betrayal, and unspoken grudges, James Hetfield is finally breaking his silence. At 61, the Metallica frontman is opening up about the story fans have obsessed over for years, his complicated, fiery history with Dave Mustaine and Megadeth. From early collaborations to bitter firings and the rivalry that reshaped heavy metal, Hetfield is revealing what really happened behind the screaming guitars and flashing lights. Why now, after all this time? And what does he really think of the man who helped build Metallica before becoming its fiercest rival? We've dug into the interviews, the confessions, and the missed opportunities to uncover the truth about one of metal's most legendary feuds. Sparks and Fury, how Metallica's early clash forged a rivalry. In 1981, four young musicians set the stage for a revolution in heavy metal. James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich were shaping what would become Metallica, but they needed someone to push the boundaries. Enter Dave Mustaine, a guitarist whose talent burned as fiercely as his temper. His jagged riffs on early tracks like The Four Horsemen and Jump in the Fire gave the band its raw, chaotic edge, leaving a mark on Metallica's DNA that fans still feel today. Yet brilliance came with a cost. Mustaine's drunken outbursts, fights with crew, and violent confrontations created constant tension. One infamous night, after his dog damaged bassist Ron McGovney's car, Mustaine lashed out in rage. Hetfield confronted him, and the blow he threw sealed his fate. Just days before Kill 'Em All went into the studio, Metallica fired him, sending him back to Los Angeles on a Greyhound bus with only his gear. Mustaine later called it the biggest betrayal of my life. The firing left Hetfield haunted. "We were all wild back then," he admitted. "But Dave took it further than we could handle. We did what we had to do, but it hurt." What could have been the end for Mustaine instead fueled him. From that rejection, he built Megadeth, crafting a band meant to rival Metallica at every turn. Each riff and lyric became a declaration of war, from exile to thrash. How Dave Mustaine forged Megadeth. Dave Mustaine didn't just leave Metallica. He was cast out, humiliated, and furious. On the bus back to Los Angeles in 1983, he wasn't staring at the window. He was plotting. Not just to form another band, but to build something that would rival and haunt the very people who had thrown him out. That vision became Megadeth. This wasn't a fresh start. It was a war. Mustaine channeled every ounce of betrayal, anger, and resentment into his music. In 1985, that rage erupted in Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, a debut album that was chaotic, blistering, and technically ferocious. One track, Mechanics, a sped-up reinterpretation of Metallica's The Four Horsemen, was a declaration. This was mine all along. All along. But Mustaine wasn't merely taking shots at his former bandmates, he was reshaping thrash metal. While Metallica gradually polished their sound with melody and structure, Megadeth doubled down on complexity, intricate riffs, abrupt tempo shifts, and aggressive vocals. Mustaine wasn't competing for fans, he was asserting dominance. The rivalry became inevitable. Metallica gained mainstream acclaim with Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, praised for their evolution and moments of vulnerability. Megadeth stayed raw, unyielding, and fiercely technical. Fans picked sides, Metallica as the polished titans, Megadeth as the uncompromising warriors of thrash. Mustaine fueled the fire with interviews filled with barbed remarks, calling Metallica sellouts and criticizing their fame. For his followers, he became the anti-hero, the wronged prodigy who came back swinging. Hetfield and Ulrich paid attention, even if silently. Hetfield later admitted, "We knew Dave was out there. It made us work harder." While Mustaine's pain erupted outward, Hetfield turned it inward, letting Metallica's music become the ultimate response. Yet the shadow of rivalry never faded. Megadeth's rising success, peace sells, but who's buying? and so far so good. So what? Cemented Mustaine as a visionary frontman. But comparisons to Metallica persisted, keeping the feud alive. By the late 1980s, what began as revenge had grown into a full-fledged metal empire. Mustaine had transformed exile into power, fury into innovation, and personal betrayal into a musical identity that would influence generations. James Hetfield's Silent Fire. How Metallica rose without Mustaine. While Dave Mustaine channeled his anger into every riff and lyric, James Hetfield remained almost eerily quiet. He didn't trade insults in interviews or publicly lash out. Instead, he buried his rivalry and frustration, letting the tension fuel his focus, his songwriting, and Metallica's rise. In silence, Hetfield found power. Mustaine's departure left a gaping hole in the band, but also created space for Hetfield to step fully into leadership. With Kirk Hammett taking over lead guitar, Hetfield became not just the frontman, but the emotional engine of Metallica. He carried the weight of Mustaine's firing, the pressure of lost potential, and a relentless drive to prove the band had made the right choice. Their next album, Ride the Lightning, in 1984, proved just that. The riffs were sharper, the compositions tighter, and the themes darker. Hetfield's lyrics explored existential fear, personal doubt, and societal disillusionment. Metallica wasn't just responding to Mustaine's shadow, they were outrunning it. Even as the band thrived, the rivalry lingered. Hetfield later admitted that Mustaine's presence in the press stayed with him. We knew Dave was always watching, and in a weird way, that pushed us. We didn't want to fall behind. We couldn't. That quiet vigilance became a motivating force, not a distraction. Then came Master of Puppets in 1986, a landmark in heavy metal history. With tracks like Battery, Welcome Home, Sanitarium, and the title track, Hetfield balanced brutality with nuance. Metallica wasn't just surviving, they were defining the genre. But Mustaine's fingerprints remained a topic among fans who debated solos and songwriting credits endlessly. Hetfield didn't need to defend himself. The music spoke for him. Behind the scenes, Hetfield wrestled with more than professional rivalries. Addiction, self-doubt, and the pressures of fame added weight to his quiet intensity. Songs like The God That Failed and The Unforgiven carried the emotional scars of those battles, some rooted in his history with Mustaine. That pain became fuel, not for confrontation, but for creation. Through And Justice for All, the Black Album, and beyond, Hetfield pushed Metallica from thrash innovators to global superstars. Critics and fans debated sellouts, musical direction, and comparisons to Megadeth, but Hetfield never wavered. He wasn't chasing Mustaine. He was building immortality. Years of restraint and focus finally culminated in a rare confrontation. Facing the past, Hetfield and Mustaine's long-awaited confrontation. By the early 2000s, both Metallica and Megadeth were heavy metal institutions. Their albums had defined the genre, their tours packed arenas, and their fan bases were fiercely loyal. Yet beneath the fame and accolades, an old wound lingered. The fallout from Dave Mustaine's firing from Metallica in 1983. Decades of unspoken resentment and unresolved anger had never fully surfaced, until a single moment in 2004 changed everything. During the filming of Some Kind of Monster, Metallica's raw documentary chronicling the making of Saint Anger, cameras captured a scene no one expected. James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine, face to face for the first time in over 20 years. The two were alone, and every word hung heavy with the weight of past betrayals. Mustaine, usually defiant and brash, appeared uncharacteristically vulnerable. He spoke plainly. "You never even said thank you. It's like you just threw me away." There was no theatrics, just decades of grief and anger spilling out. Hetfield, tense but attentive, didn't argue or defend himself. He explained the chaos of their early years, the drugs, the drinking, the volatile personalities, and admitted that firing Mustaine had been a matter of survival, not malice. Even so, his tone carried something deeper: remorse. The conversation was not a reconciliation, but it was a rare, human moment of honesty. Fans saw two legendary musicians not as rivals, but as people still haunted by their past. The dialogue didn't offer closure. Mustaine remained haunted by feeling erased from Metallica's history, and Hetfield still carried guilt for a decision made in youth. There were no hugs or dramatic reconciliations, just a raw confrontation that peeled back the years of silence. Critics called it one of the most candid moments in rock documentary history, a scene where the feud was stripped of hype, reduced to its emotional core. In the months and years that followed, both men reflected on that meeting. Mustaine acknowledged the conversation mattered, but the deeper wounds weren't fully healed. Hetfield, too, was cautious, slowly recognizing Mustaine's influence and contributions without rekindling a close personal relationship. Still, something had shifted. Public references by Hetfield to Mustaine became more respectful, and Mustaine, while still vocal, began to speak of Hetfield with nuance rather than raw anger. When a reunion nearly happened, Hetfield, Mustaine, and the collaboration that never was. After the raw confrontation captured in Some Kind of Monster, fans dared to dream that James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine might finally close a decades-long chapter of bitterness. Their feud had become legendary, an intricate tapestry of fights, firings, and music history. But in the quiet aftermath of that face-to-face, a surprising idea emerged. What if the two metal titans actually worked together again? The notion wasn't born from gossip or fan wishful thinking. Between 2020 and 2023, Mustaine himself began hinting at the possibility in interviews, at first casually, then more seriously. Behind the scenes, the two reportedly explored a real collaboration, not just a reunion for appearances. The concept: revisit early Metallica material, the songs they had written together before Mustaine's infamous firing. For fans, it would have been historic, a chance to hear Hetfield and Mustaine side by side again as the original architects of thrash metal, crafting something that promised both nostalgia and redemption. But the moment of hope didn't last. In a 2023 interview with Guitar.com, Mustaine explained why the project stalled. Communication had been open, the bitterness held at bay. But then came the topic of publishing rights. Mustaine felt he had never received proper credit for certain early Metallica songs. When he brought it up to Hetfield, the conversation abruptly ended. Hetfield didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply went quiet. Mustaine later summed it up bluntly. Once I brought that up, it was over. There was no theatrics, no anger-fueled argument, just disappointment. Mustaine had extended a cautious hand, and for a moment it seemed it might be accepted. Instead, decades of unresolved tension resurfaced, the old scars proving too deep to ignore. Fans were left with a bitter aftertaste, mourning what could have been. A collaboration not just of talent, but of shared history and musical legacy. Yet, the fact that the conversation even happened signals something. Hetfield didn't shut it down immediately. He entertained it, a small but significant shift from years of silence. Later, when asked about Mustaine's account, Hetfield gave a restrained response. I respect him. I respect what he's done. That's where we are right now. Not a bridge, not a confrontation, just measured acknowledgement, the hallmark of Hetfield's career-long approach. Let the music speak. How fans fueled the metal divide. As Hetfield and Mustaine wrestled privately with decades of tension, their fans were waging a battle of their own, loud, passionate, and fiercely divided. From the late 1980s into the 1990s, metalheads drew clear lines. You were either Team Metallica or Team Megadeth. There was no in-between. Metallica commanded visibility, filling arenas with their polished sound and mainstream appeal. The Black Album in 1991 cemented their global dominance, bringing heavy metal to millions. But for a devoted segment of fans, that polish came at a cost. Megadeth, with Mustaine at the helm, doubled down on technical ferocity and unrelenting thrash, creating albums like Peace Sells, but Who's Buying and Rust in Peace. They weren't chasing charts, they were pushing boundaries. For die-hard fans, Megadeth symbolized purity and authenticity, a rebellion against commercial compromises. Metallica represented evolution, experimentation, and melodic complexity. Forums, letters to magazines, and even high school debates became battlegrounds. The media amplified the divide, framing every interview and quote as another shot in the ongoing metal wars. And in a way, both bands benefited. The rivalry drew attention and fueled anticipation. Over time, however, fans began to see the bigger picture. Liking Metallica didn't mean dismissing Megadeth, and loyalty to Megadeth didn't require rejecting Metallica. Both bands were incredible in their own right. By the 2000s, a new generation of fans explored the roots of thrash with open ears, blending both bands into their playlists. Festivals like Big Four allowed Metallica and Megadeth to share the same stage, turning old tension into celebration. Yet the tribal energy never fully disappeared. Nostalgia kept the debates alive, but now the arguments were more about appreciation than conflict. Fans understood that the rivalry had made both bands stronger, pushing them to innovate and excel. Hetfield and Mustaine didn't just challenge each other, they pushed audiences to care deeper, to listen harder. Behind the scenes, the what-ifs lingered. The question of a possible collaboration haunted both camps. What if Mustaine had never been fired? What if they had built Metallica together from start to finish? That potential, still alive in conversations and interviews, became a symbol of unfinished business. Mustaine openly floated reunion ideas, and Hetfield acknowledged the talent Mustaine had brought to early Metallica. But even when olive branches were offered, old wounds and mistrust often pulled them back apart. A near miss in 2023 highlighted just how delicate that balance was. Mustaine revealed he and Hetfield discussed reworking some of their earliest Metallica material, a project that could have been both creative and symbolic. But when Mustaine brought up publishing rights, Hetfield went silent and the opportunity vanished. The spark of potential collaboration was gone, a reminder of how the past can overshadow even the most sincere attempts at reconciliation.